to Bill Vogney. And that's how Bill found out that he was getting the website, was from my announcement. And he sent me a DM and he's like, I about fell out of my chair, or something like that. He's like, why would you do this? I'm like, because the site needs to still exist. Like, there needs to be someone running this. And if the studio isn't going to trust me with it, they certainly trust you. And you obviously know lines that I don't. And you've got relationships that I don't. So I'll make sure that goes to good hands, and I'll just do Putter Talk.
Yeah.
And that's when I put a bunch of effort into Putter Talk. And my first call was to Bob Bettinardi and said, here's what I did with Cameron's brand. I'm going to do a podcast. Will you be a guest on it? And he was like, I think I had to go through Todd Schumacher was his.
Yeah. TSK.
Yeah. Todd Schumacher was his tour rep at the time, or not tour rep, but like the cool stuff rep. And he put it all together, and I went with you to Studio B and posted up with Bob, and Bob would just talk. Boy, did he have stories. Because
I mean, I would love to put those on record, but I'm not putting that on record.
Well,
I don't need a letter from somebody.
Yeah, Bob had made all of Scotty's putters for the first
there's part of what
several years. No, this is all public. I'm not saying any secret. Like, Bob tells you he's got them in his office.
That's what I mean.
They're in his office. All the stuff he had made them for the first several years, and so he had all kinds of similar stories about his interactions with the studio and Cameron. And
there was a lot of bad blood between those two camps.
There was a lot of bad blood between those two camps, and that's what really kicked off the us versus them thing.
I'll tell you what was weird, as your friend and someone who was, I want to say, a sidekick who kind of rode shotgun during all this, was an outsider looking in. It almost felt like we got in a divorce. Not you and I.
No.
Me, you, everyone else, and a Cushnet. And I remember to this day, like, I still, and this sounds weird, but I still feel weird on FootJoy stuff. I still feel weird
on Titleist
playing
stuff.
Pro V1. It's because I know kind of what, and I don't think people really understand the anguish that you were going through.
It was rough.
And it was a young family trying to figure it out. You just did this for stuff for a hobby, and all of a sudden they're basically saying, if you don't, we're going to send our attorneys at. I mean, they didn't threaten it, I don't think. But that's basically where it was going to.
For me, it wasn't about that. That's what was funny.
It was just fun for you.
It was always just fun and a passion. And this was something that, and I got my dad into collecting. And so my dad and I were collecting together.
Yeah.
And like, when I went out and built the Art of Putters website, like, Rand said, let me get something special for you. I'm like, tell you what, I'd rather you do something special for my dad. And so he sent a putter for my dad that Scotty signed, to Gary, best wishes, Scotty Cameron. Like, that was the thing, is we did that together. And so my dad had a big collection. I had a big collection. And then when it all kicked off back to Putter Talk, my dad sold all his Cameron stuff too. And
yeah, it felt weird.
Yeah.
I will say one thing. So back in the day, I remember when you got your 09, you and I talked, and I said, I want to buy a custom putter.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this until the day I die. And you literally had to wait in line to be able to purchase a $2,000 putter back in the day.
Yeah.
And so we reached out to Nick and ran, I don't know how long ago, 20 years ago, and ordered myself one. Mm-hmm. And I remember it showed up. And I brought it to your house in your basement. I'll never forget this. And we're oohing and eyeing. And I posted pictures on either Putter Talk or the Camera Collector. It's probably the Camera Collector time, because we wouldn't have bought a tour. And I paid like $2,100. Mm-hmm. And some guy was like, I give you $3,500 for it.
Yeah.
I don't think I hit two balls with that thing. I think maybe in your basement, that thing was shipped and sold. I mean, it was crazy.
That's how it was back then. People today, fast forward for a second, that happens today still at those same dollar amounts, if not higher.
Yeah,
and that's the collector mentality with this. And so I think that's where all of this, and we can talk about Putter Talk for days, and we can talk about, when Nick, went over to Bettinardi and helping that happen. It's the same collector mentality. And here's what I've come to realize. the high-end putter collector community is largely made up of, I mean, these aren't people on minimum wage. Like, these are all people with money or that aspire to. Like, it's like, for some people, it's a big life event for them to buy their first Rolex.
Yep.
For some people, it's the big life event for them to buy their first tour putter. Not that the Seiko that they were wearing before tells time any differently than the Submariner that they just bought, but it's an accomplishment. It's an achievement. And then when you get to the level where you've got people with multiple putters and multiple head covers, these are people that are captains of industry. These are people that have employees. These are people that have staff. These are people that are managers.
Do you remember seeing, and this goes back a long time ago, and this is my own 2 cents in it. I remember John Sharon, who we befriended. We became good friends.
Yeah.
And I remember going into his office one day. He said, come on over and I'll show you what I have.
Yeah.
And he had a wall of putters
Yep.
that Larry would have probably bought. I know would have bought my first house, may have bought your first house.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that type of,
Yeah.
and it was impressive.
Yeah.
And John wasn't a guy
He's
who bought him to impress. He wasn't impressing, but he loved, it was like buying art for him. And
it's
he
like
loved
buying art. So that's the thing. With collectors, you've got 2 camps. You've got the camp that wants to have something that nobody else has, and you have the camp that's an art collector. Now, neither of those 2 camps of people like being told no. So that's where keeping these forums in balance for all those years was a trick, because I've got a whole group of people that are used to not taking no for an answer when they couldn't have something. And when they were told that, no, you have to be on a waiting list for this, then that becomes special. Then it became a thing. And nowadays it's even worse, because the industry has exploded. Like, if there were 10,000 people involved when we were doing it, or 5,000, there are 250,000 now.
Right.
So it's this, but it's the same game on a much bigger scale.
Yeah, that's what I don't think people understand. Like, and this is my whole point and why I think it was important, besides you being a great friend of mine, but to get your story out, because I don't think people understand really the beginning of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the Tyson Lambs, those guys really, they may not be here if it wasn't for people like you. And I know you will never take credit, and I get all that.
Yeah.
But I don't think people understand the impact you've had on the industry.
Well, it's more than just being an OG collector, and for whatever that means now.
Right.
And that's something that really, so like with Putter Talk, that opened me up to, I was having dinners with David Mills at TP Mills. Byron Morgan became a dear friend of mine.
Right.
And he would send me videos of him making cool stuff, and boxes would just randomly show up at my house of something he thought was cool that he sent my way. I've got, I'll never sell a Byron putter ever. We just lost him last year. I texted him on a random day, and I got a text back from his wife saying, "Hey, Byron, isn't doing well. He's in hospice. We're not telling many people right now."
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
But and then the same thing was, what was a really funny story when Nick had a similar falling out with Scotty that I had. He calls me and it was like, "How well do you know Bob Bettinardi?" And I'm like, I'll set up a lunch. Like, we'll have dinner, no problem. And you and I go out to Chicago.
I was going to say, so...
Yeah, it was you, me, Jimmy, Nick,
Jimmy Sorsey,
Nick Venson, and Bob. And the 4 of us sitting there and really kind of explaining, like, this is how rabid these collectors are. Because nobody was really there were Bettinardi collectors, but not on the crazy level that it is now.
Yeah, I remember, too, being younger, and I remember hitting a Bettinardi putter in a store, right?
Yeah.
And I wow, these felt great.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the panache. They didn't have...
It was a brand you had to know about.
Yeah. And unfortunately, good, bad, or indifferent,
yeah,
a lot of people loved buying Scotties for the head cover. And I don't mean they loved his head cover. It was like you said earlier, it was like, I could wear a Timex, but I'm going to show off my Rolex. And I don't mean showy. But I think a lot of people today, if you closed their eyes and you said, hit one putt with one and one of another, I think a lot of people, the average guy, would have a hard time really telling you which one's which, but man, that head cover. Whoo! And listen, I'm guilty of it.
Oh,
I love a good looking golf bag.
Yeah.
And I like it to look a certain way.
Yeah.
But I do. It's funny you say that. And I do remember meeting with them.
Yeah, we sat right there and all went through, and Bob at the time was very into how things were milled, and you could tell he put a lot of effort and a lot of like really particular attention into milling.
And he also did a lot of stuff for the military. He kept telling us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean that's a big company that mills lots of things for lots of places. So like putters wasn't the primary,
No.
No.
It was almost like, and we met him early on, but it was almost like a hobby almost, right?
I don't want to say it was a hobby because it was a legit business. Like they were milling for Mizuno at the time. So like they were doing that. But what was interesting was when you, me, Nick, and Jimmy met with Bob, like Nick started asking questions about like stamping, and Bob was like, we don't want to stamp things. That's sloppy. Like I'll mill it. And it's like, yeah, but people like stuff that's handcrafted and custom.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I can mill it custom. And so that's when I think Nick's brain started to go into overdrive, like, yeah, we can mill all kinds of crazy stuff. And that really helped that out. And then, I remember having to, or getting the invite to the first social, like, because that was the thing. Like, when I threw the Cameron Collector birthday party, that was the first time that a lot of those people met each other in person.
I'd say 100%.
I think there were 250 people there.
I don't think 5 people that had met each. I mean, literally.
Yeah, there were people that flew in from all over the place.
Yeah.
We had this little event for 24 of us for the previous 2 days, and then the big event was on Sunday at Little Mountain. There were 250 people that showed up to play golf and meet with each other, and we closed that course down. And we were there all night. I remember driving home just exhausted from the weekend. But my wife, Angie, had come out, and, she shows up. She's, 8 months pregnant or whatever, and was like, this is what these people do? I'm like, yeah.
I tell you what's interesting to me is it was such a long few days prior.
Oh, yeah.
That on Sunday, I remember saying, I don't even have the energy to play anymore.
I didn't play.
Yeah.
No, I stayed on the 18th green, and I just putted with everybody that came up.
I remember that was they gave away, you guys had a raffle for a Cameron putter, which you've never seen probably before or after. I mean, it just wasn't done.
Yeah.
Let's get into putter talk a little bit. So,
yep.
Some of my favorite brands this day came out of putter talk. And I'm going to go down some of them. Mm-hmm. You have a way better idea than all of them. Obviously, TP Mills. Mm-hmm. Jay Green was handling it at the time.
Yep.
Bettinardi.
Yep.
I mean, we worked with. It started off with those few guys. Mm-hmm. I remember it exploded, and you probably don't remember this, but Nike was involved, Pink was involved,
yep.
And we had everybody involved.
Yeah, you and I flew out to Beaverton to meet with Robert Luna
on
his second day of being head of golf at
when he took over for Nike.
Yeah, he took over for Nike, and we're sitting there in Beaverton at like 5 p.m. on a Wednesday.
It was right before Christmas.
It was right before Christmas,
yeah.
And his questions were, how do you get a community like this? Like, how do you build up a base that can do this, 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 and this? And I'm like, well, where are you guys making your putters? He's like, we don't even have a good design yet.
Right.
Like he had just taken, it was literally his first week on the job.
I think what's funny when I think back of those relationships, obviously Rob's still with Nike, but golf division's a whole different. But yeah. I remember Pete Samuels from Ping would send us putters. And I remember we have this guy, you'd get these huge boxes of putters, and we were like, what are we going to do with all these?
I had at the time, in my own collection, probably 150 putters.
Right.
And then manufacturers, like every day a box was on my front door. Or no, I had a P.O. box. And I would get a text. It was at the UPS store. I had a box. That was the official address for Putter Talk. And I would get a text almost every day. And if it was a package that was abnormal in size, there would be a code with it. And they were all like long, skinny box, long, skinny box, long, skinny box, long, skinny box. Like people were just sending me shit to review. And so I'd try to stay on top of it and try to review.
It was a ton.
And I couldn't get to them all.
And I think what a lot of the misnomer with a lot of people is you're in the golf world. you must golf a lot. And I remember you and I would say like, and George is probably want to tell you, he probably plays 3 times a year. We just never had time to even get out and play.
No.
So a lot of the testing was literally done maybe on a putting green or the green you had.
I would go to, I was a member at Mayfield Country Club at the time. So I would either go to Mayfield or Sandridge, and I would show up with a staff bag full of putters, and I would lay them all out, and I would just putt for an hour. And more than once, like another member would walk up and thought it was like a demo day or something, and he would pick up a putter and start putting with it. And so I'd go up and ask them and say, you know, hi, I'm a member here. This is, you know, what I do. What do you think of this? And I'd get their input, and that would turn into reviews. So I just started cranking out reviews for Putter Talk.
So Putter Talk grew immensely.
Yeah.
A lot of incredible relationships grew out of Putter Talk. And I would say more genuine than we thought we had with, let's say, the former relationship.
Yeah.
And certainly you more than me. Any brands that that stick out to you that you really loved, designs that you love that you still think about this? I remember Machine putters, very different, very cool putter back in the day.
Yeah, Machine is boy, Dave made a cool putter. That was a really cool putter. That was a really cool brand. I liked what he was doing. I think he had the right idea of different but same. So it wasn't so far out there in left field. Like it wasn't like the spider putter where it showed up. People were like, what the is that?
Exactly.
It was classic designs done in a new way with cool materials. Like that was just a really cool, I liked that brand a lot. And I had 2 Machine putters, and I gave them to people to play with for a week, and I never got either of them back. And I wish I still had. There's one in particular that I wish I still had.
What was a darker, I remember, shade of?
It was aluminum bronze with a stainless neck.
Yep.
Because he had this neat system where you would put the neck would screw into the bottom of the putter. It'd be like this would be the head, and then there would be a hole, and it would go through, and then there was a
one of
thing
the
at the bottom.
first, I want to say, that had movable weights, right?
Yeah, he had a patent on it.
Yeah,
he had a patent. He had a patent on movable weights, and was embroiled with a lawsuit with TaylorMade for years because his patent was movable weights on a golf club, not a putter, a golf club.
Yeah.
And TaylorMade came out with the R7 with the movable weights.
I remember that.
And he was all over it. And I think he spent years in court with them. I don't know what ended up ever happening with that, but no, I remember him very clearly having that patent and me talking with him a lot about that.
So Putter Talk.
And then Golf Opinions happened.
Yeah, that was the next. Yeah. So Golf Opinions happened.
Yeah, so I get a call one day from Jay Green at TP Mills and says, hey, I know you're crushing it with Putter Talk right now, but what about all golf clubs? And I'm like, dude, no. Like, I'm not going to start a new website. And he's like, no. There's a website called Golf Opinions that has been running for a few years, and their founders are kind of running out of steam. And I think you could do something with it. It was a really old golf forum software. At this time, I was good friends with the people at Golf WRX. I was good friends with the people at the Sand Trap. Those were the other 2 like big golf websites, and My Golf Spy. And I'm like, does there really need to be a competing brand? He's like, just talk to them. So I talked to them, and they're like, look, we'll sell you this site. We just want it in good hands. Like, we just want this thing to go somewhere else. All right, so I look. It had like 30,000 members and years worth of posts, like 10 plus years worth of posts. Like, it had started way before even Cameron Collector started. So I took that over, converted it, and made it the same software that Putter Talk was running on. And I want to say within 6 months, that then had 80,000 members. And that thing blew up, and that was a whole different set of everything. And then I get a call from the guys at Golf WRX, and they're like, would you be interested in selling Golf Opinions? And I'm like, at that time, like, my moderators were like, look, we're ready to tap out. Like, we're not into like moderating 5 different websites for free. And I wasn't making any money on any of them. So It wasn't like I was like rolling in cash that I could pay moderators or community managers and that kind of stuff back then.
I think that's such a important thing to tell people because, again, this isn't 2022 where you can make tons of money. Now you'd be driving a Bugatti.
No, my moderators never made a dime. It was, and candidly, we couldn't have built what we built without those moderators. Like, that was just as much them as it was me. My name was on the door, but I wasn't getting paid, and neither were they. This was because of a love of a hobby.
Yeah.
Like, at the time, the main moderators at Putter Talk were Smitty and John Rondolino and John Sharon and George Palombi, TJ. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. I think my dad was like a moderator, but that was just because I wanted him to be able to talk in the private chat rooms.
And for the record, guys, I asked to not be a moderator.
Yeah, no, you didn't want to. You didn't want to deal with it.
No, it's a lot of work, and it just wasn't. I think
it's a thankless job.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's a job that you can make a lot of money doing, but back then it was literally a thankless job. So I at that point I'm like, that's fine. So I sold Golf Opinions to Golf WRX. And concentrated on Putter Talk and ran that for maybe another couple years. But really, my focus had to drift because I had taken institutional investment at Sparkbase at the time.
Yeah.
And they were looking at me like, what are you doing messing around with this free website that you're not making anything on?
Right.
When we just pumped, $10 million into your company.
Yeah. So you grew Sparkbase, which I want to say you were a serial entrepreneur, but you kind of are.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah, I am.
And that was going on. You grew your company from literally, I think, a handful of people to over 100 something at one point.
85 was where we topped out. So close to 100, yeah.
And this is why this is all going on. Why Putter Talk, why Golf Opinions is all going on. By the way, my business is exploding.
Yeah. I was traveling 52 weeks a year. I was logging about 200,000 miles in the air a year domestic. So just bouncing between Cleveland and Seattle and San Francisco and Atlanta and Dallas. I would ping pong all week long. Like I would just pack a bag Monday morning and leave, go to the office, and then wherever I ended up that night was where I ended up.
You were missing in action for a while.
Yeah.
So you get away from the golf world for a while.
Yeah.
Right. So
and Putter Talk's running itself, and the mods were doing a great job at keeping the lights on.
So let's fast forward to a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you have good relationships with Nick Benson. Nick creates swag.
Yep.
Literally out of left field.
Yeah.
And for I don't want to tell Nick's story, and I don't want to speak for him, but essentially what's happened was the Bettinardi camp got rid of all of their distributors. Is that the easiest way to explain it?
I think the best way to diplomatically explain it without speaking for somebody that isn't here to tell their story is that the business changed.
Yeah.
The business changed, and Nick saw an opening for something that he thought would get legs. And so that's what he did.
And shockingly, it exploded in the midst of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, that company was launched in April of 2018. It even says on the website when no one was asking for a new putter company, he launched it because he saw a need for, he's always been a visionary, and he saw a need for that type of product in the market where it wasn't being done elsewhere. Like crazy high stitch counts, super high quality head covers, super high quality putters, like stuff that he had talked to other manufacturers about, can we do this? And they told him no.
Right.
So he went out and did it on his own.
Before we get into all swag,
let's
have a real quick conversation of head covers.
Yeah.
And so you designed head covers. I don't even know what year it was. Your guess would be way better than mine at this point. So you had come up with some of the craziest, best looking head covers still to date that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You had done some, obviously, with AM&E early on. Mm-hmm. Putter Talk, you had done some of those.
I did 4, let me think. I did 2 designs for Putter Talk.
Well, I've got white and green, white and pink, that one, American flag, white and blue. I
Well,
think I have.
with AM&E, I only got 2. And then there was a third head cover that I wanted to do that was a Space Invaders head cover.
Okay.
And I sent the designs over. They sent me the prototype, and it didn't look great. And I said, hey, look, we need to change this, and this. And I got no response. And then a week later, I get a letter in the mail saying that they're no longer able to take my business. And
This was right after the Cameron
this was
breakup, right?
Cameron Collector had that all had happened, and this was my first foray into making money on Powder Talk. Was I was going to do head covers. I think I sold them for $50.
Yeah.
I think my cost on was 30. So it's not like I'm rolling in dough here. I just did them more because people were asking for them. And I made the 4th of July head cover, and I had made the one before that. I think I made like 50 of each, and like 10 specials of each, like different colorways. And then I get this letter that's AM&E saying we won't take your business. And at the time, they still had the patent on that shape head cover.
Right.
So I couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So
they lost that patent a few years ago, right?
Yeah, several. Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember seeing some of those designs.
Yeah, I had some cool designers that I was working with, and they came up with some fun stuff. Like I had this one that was it was the nose of a plane, and it had the mouth of a shark, like the old bombers from World War II.
Think about doing those now or no?
No.
Is that ship has sailed?
That ship has sailed.
They were cool. They were really, I don't know. You could do it even under.
Here's the thing. There are, as you can see, like there are way more talented people. Like I'll have a good idea now and then.
Yeah.
But now, I work at Swag. So I go to Nick or I go to the art department and say, hey, this might be a stupid idea, but I thought of this the other night. And sometimes they're like, no. And sometimes they're like, oh, that would actually be funny.
So let's talk last year, I'm assuming. Yeah, last year you're having a conversation with Nick.
Well, back up a little further. So in 2019, Nick sends me a text and said, we really need Putter Talk back. And at the time, it had still been running. It was just kind of there. There were probably 100 members. I hadn't spent any time with it. I was just paying the server bill every month to keep the lights on. And there were a few moderators that were keeping the torch lit. And so I told them, I'm like, look, all right, I told Nick, I said, I'll do it, but like, it's a different game. Like everything's moved on to Facebook. Like, it was interesting when I started Cameron Collector, everybody grumped about going from an email listserv to a forum. And then I started the Putter Talk Facebook group, and everybody grumped about going to a Facebook group instead of the web forum. And, now everything's moving to Discord, and people are grumping about moving from Facebook to Discord. But that's a different story. So I call my dad, and say, hey, what do you think about restarting Putter Talk? Would you be like, I had just sold a company, so I had some time to kill. And he's like, yeah, that could be fun. We could do that together. So my dad and I put a bunch of money into this rebuild of Putter Talk, and it went off great. And within a week or two, we had tons and tons of traffic again, and we were selling head covers. I called Nick, and he put me in touch with Justin down at EP and vouched for me.
That was the I'm Back head cover, right?
Yeah, that was the I'm Back head cover. Yep. Yeah, this the Terminator one there. And I sold those head covers, and that was kind of cool. That was a little bit of revenue, and I just kind of wanted it to exist again, just to have a platform. And my dad, about 6 months after we got it started and really got running again, we had done, I think, 3 head covers, and my dad falls for a phishing scam and transferred the domain to somebody in Russia. Website goes down like that. I call GoDaddy. They're like, it was an authentic signature. There's nothing we can do. It instantly went away. So I lost the domain. I lost the data. I lost all that because they logged in because my dad had given away the keys, and it all just went poof. And it wasn't until about a year and a half ago that I actually got the domain back. I saw it listed for sale by someone who had bought it from that person for, I think, $2,500. And as soon as I saw it listed, I had a Google alert. I saw it listed and I just snapped it up. Like I felt like I needed to own that. So I still own the domain. I don't know that I'll ever do anything with it ever again, just because I've kind of moved on. And I don't know that there's a need for something like that anymore. Like there's so many brands out there that all have their own camps. And the way that you build up a community now is very different than how we had to do it back then.
Yeah.
So the way you do it now is through Instagram and Facebook and like
more social media driven
and more ad spend driven. And that wasn't ever anything we were into. So, you know, people go to GolfWorks or My Golf Spy for their reviews now. Like there are people that are doing it better than I could.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, really the reason why I finally felt like it was okay for me to pick a side.